Good morning, President Zattlers, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me to take part in the opening of the Rīgas Security Forum 2019. The Latvian Institute of Foreign Affairs is the oldest think tank in Latvia, dating from 1992, and continues to provide decision makers, experts, and the public with considered analysis and issues important for our democracy, our security, and our freedom. The security of our democracy, our democratic order, our independence, depends on many factors. Military defense is only one of them. Of equal and maybe growing importance is the belief and trust of our population to our country, our nation, our values, and the democracy. Let me therefore begin with the hard security. Our three Baltic states have learned from bitter experience in the past that militarily we cannot stand alone if we have a very large, powerful, and aggressive neighbor on our borders, such as the Soviet Union in 1939. During the pre-war years, our states each spent about 1/4 of the total national budget for defense. It amounts to a great deal more than the NATO guideline of 2% of GDP. We had relatively large, modern armies equipped with aviation tanks and submarines, which were near the top of the range for the time. Nevertheless, in 1939, we were compelled to accept major Soviet bases in our territory, and 1940 were illegally occupied in the same week as Paris fell to the Nazis. Half a century of brutal repression followed with the decapitation of our nations. Our leaders and thinkers, teachers, civil servants were murdered or deported along with large part of our population. Having learned from this painful experience, it is no surprise that our primary goal now, after the regaining of independence, was to join NATO, the world's strongest military alliance. It's important to note that the first joint decision made by the three Baltic presidents on this day, 13th of September 1993, was to join the North Atlantic Alliance. Now, 2018, we reached the 2% of GDP benchmark for defense spending. It's worth it to note that the Saeima, or Parliament's decision to this, was unanimous, supported by both government and opposition. Additional funding has allowed us significantly to enhance our self-defense capabilities. In addition, we have enacted legislation according to which it is the duty of our armed forces to resist military aggression and military occupation. It's illegal to give an order not to resist. In other words, the events of 1939-1940 should not be repeated. But most important, the Warsaw Summit decision about the deployment of an enhanced forward presence in the Baltic states has made NATO's deterrence position much more credible without posing a military threat to Russia. Here I would like to express my particular gratitude to Canada, which is the excellent framework nation for Latvia's EFP battalion, and to Albania, the Czech Republic, Italy, Montenegro, Poland, Slovakia, Slovenia, and Spain for the troop contributions that they continue to make. Our strategic partnership with the United States is of special importance, and we are proud to be the host for 13 US Black Hawk helicopters in our base at Leeuwarden. I am convinced that the AFP is a direct contribution to the security of each of our allies, as well as NATO, because it substantially reduces the risk of conflict. Of course, a great deal more need to be done. For instance, in terms of rapid reinforcement planning, pre-positioning and air defense, but we have made a good start in terms of hard security. Let me now turn to the less easily defined questions surrounding societal soft security. It's axiomatic that a state can only exist and function if its population believes in it. This means that the so-called hybrid threats to our values and rule-based systems are as dangerous as the weapons held by hostile forces. Here I am not referring to the blurring of the line between internal disorder and external aggression. Rather to more sophisticated direct and indirect attacks on our states and our attitude towards our countries. These are difficult issues which required careful studies. It is encouraging that they are taken very seriously by both NATO and European Union. Recently, I had the opportunity to visit the Helsinki-based European Center of Excellence for Countering Hybrid Threats and to hear at first hand about the important work they are doing. I should also mention our own NATO Stratcom Center for Excellence in Riga, which in a short time has earned an excellent international reputation for professionalism in their studies. So, what are the threats to the societies? Well, they involve a whole range of vectors. Some commentators talk about the weaponization of information, energy, money, and corrupt practices. In 1986, I used the expression cognitive war in my master thesis at the University of Hamburg. My German professors were not at all satisfied with it and only reluctantly allowed me to keep it in because they believed that it's not an academic term, cognitive war. However, it is an expression which accurately reflects the reality, at least today, in which modern technology is used to achieve age-old goals. We are having to deal with a dramatic technological change, which has brought with it a completely new way in which people interact, especially using social media. If quite recently we were concerned about cyber attacks and information warfare, we now have to deal with a combination of the two. Of course, traditional cyber threats continue to target our communications, our provision of such essentials as financial services, energy, water, and so forth. But while fake news or information warfare deals with facts or their distortion, cognitive war aims deeper. That is our interpretation and perception of those facts. Artificial intelligence, big data, the advent of quantum computing, and soon also deep fakes will make our cognitive space even more challenging. We have already seen how populist messages quickly can spread, become attractive in this new environment. When we add to this growth of filter bubbles, encryption of social media and its fragmentation into like-minded groups, then it is unsurprising that when it has called the continued influence effect on perceptions has a huge potential to affect on our population, the opinion of the public. This is a new and growing challenge to our values and our democracies. Article 1 of the Latvian Constitution states that Latvia is an independent democratic republic. In order for this to work, our citizens should be able to make informed decisions. This implies that they must not only receive objective, accurate information through various types of media, but must also be equipped with the critical thinking required to make sense of it, to distinguish between fake news, false interpretation, and the truth. In other words, having a free and healthy media is a matter of national security. It is no coincidence that Russia's reaction to events like the downing of the flight MH17 over Donbass was to produce the flood of alternative theories of what had happened. The aim is to question the very existence of the truth as such, to imply that there are simply a number of different interpretations from which we can each choose the one which suits us best. Social media can be used to undermine trust in the democratic process. That is why I have chosen the digital space, smart technologies, and information technologies among my working priorities. Their misuse and abuse were a direct threat to our social cohesion, our values, our democratic system, and our freedom. I mentioned earlier that democracies can only function if they have support in the population. This entails trust in the state and its institutions. Therefore, believe in the fair interpretation and implementation of the rule of law. It's fundamental to a successful democratic state. This is another way to deal with threats. Of course, there are many ways in which the population rely on the states. This includes education, health care, and a reasonable expectation of a retirement pension after working age. All of this are necessary if we are to achieve the level of solidarity, inclusion, and trust required for the continuance of the state and democracy. But in my view, trust in the rule of law is the most important of this. Ladies and gentlemen, having outlined my approach to freedom and security, let me finish by drawing attention to some other challenges which face us all. First of all, NATO, our alliance. NATO has gone through many challenges in the past and has been severely tested during the Cold War. More recently, there have been ups and downs from the lack of unanimity over the war in Iraq to commendable solidarity with the one and only implementation of Article 5 following the 9/11 attacks in the US. But now we are seeing challenges to alliance cohesion. Brexit may be one, we sincerely hope not. But the questioning of the US commitment to NATO by some Europeans, despite the massive cross-party support for NATO and Article 5 in Congress, would create dangerous fault lines. This must be avoided. To the three global risks of unforeseen nuclear war, climate change, and biological risks, we may add possible new developing challenges. Each of this alone is worthy to a series of conferences. Each will also test the resilience of NATO. Therefore, I believe that we must do everything possible to maintain our valuable alliance. It is not enough that the so-called frontline states spend 2% of GDP on defense. This is a very real investment in our own security and for all allies and members of the NATO. We must stick together in the face of the upcoming challenges I have outlined. If we fail to uphold our democracies and our values, we will ultimately lose our freedom. We should look to the broader West in order to confront authoritarianism, whether political or digital. NATO can and should provide us a firm foundation upon which to build. In conclusion, I would like to state that I am optimist. I was part of the Baltic Way. I saw that the Berlin Wall fell a few months later, and I felt at first hand the fragility of an authoritarian system like the USSR. We should not forget the lessons of 30 years ago and must continue to stand up for our values on which our freedom is based. Then our alliance, our countries and our free people will continue to live and to prosper. Thank you for your attention.